Welcome to the SafetyWorks Training Institute's presentation of Introduction to Personal Protective Equipment. I'm here at the SafetyWorks Training Institute by myself today, so I'm going to take my mask off. Now, our objective today is to understand the purpose of personal protective equipment, the employer and employee's responsibilities, and the variety of personal protective equipment available for the hazards. OSHA requires employers to address hazards using the hierarchy of controls. Elimination, substitution, engineering, and administrative controls are supposed to be put in place prior to personal protective equipment. PPE is the last line of protection because it is only a barrier and does not eliminate or reduce the hazard. Now, this training covers general awareness of the various personal protective equipment required by OSHA. We will discuss the employer's responsibilities and the varieties of head, eye, face, hearing, respiratory, hand, foot, and fall protection. This is awareness only. Employers must perform a hazard assessment of the workplace to identify and control physical and health hazards. They need to be able to identify and provide the appropriate PPE for those physical and health hazards. They'll train employees on the use and the care of the personal protective equipment, how to maintain the personal protective equipment, including replacing worn or damaged PPE. And they need to periodically review, update, and evaluate the effectiveness of the PPE program. Now, employers must pay for personal protective equipment, except in a few situations. Those situations include non-specialty safety toe protective footwear, including steel toe shoes or boots. Employers are not required to pay for those according to OSHA. They are something that you could use at home, and that's kind of the determining factor. But that doesn't mean that employers won't pay for it. Some do offer that benefit. Non-specialty prescription safety eyewear. If you have to have a prescription, they may or may not provide safety eyewear with your prescription. Some will, but they're not required to. Everyday clothing, indoors and out, jackets, boots, warm clothing for like hats and mittens, those you need to provide. Items such as hairnets and gloves worn by food workers for consumer safety are not required to be provided. And when the employee has lost or intentionally damaged the PPE and it must be replaced, employers don't need to pay for that then, they can make you pay for that. Now, employees must properly wear personal protective equipment. Employees must attend training sessions on PPE, on how to care for, clean, and maintain that PPE, and inform a supervisor of the need to repair or replace it. And they need to inspect prior to use. Now, there's some general rules. PPE shall be provided, used, and maintained, and defective or damaged personal protective equipment shall not be used. Now, the employer shall provide training to each employee who is required to use personal protective equipment. Each employee shall know when PPE is necessary, what kinds of PPE are required, how to properly don, doff, adjust, and wear the personal protective equipment, the proper care, maintenance, useful life, and disposal of the PPE. Each affected employee shall demonstrate an understanding of the proper use of personal protective equipment before being allowed to perform work requiring it. Employers need to retrain employees when changes in the workplace render previous training obsolete, or changes in the types of PPE to be used render previous training obsolete, or inadequacy in the affected employee's knowledge or use of the PPE. This screen is a certification of hazard assessment. This is required by any employee who has personal protective equipment used in the workplace. Each task must be assessed to determine the hazards and the appropriate personal protective equipment required to perform that task. As I said before, all other engineering and administrative controls must be addressed prior to personal protective equipment. So let's look at a few pieces of equipment. First off, we want to protect our head, and that may require some kind of a hard hat. The hazards to our head include falling objects, electricity, contact with bumping into, say, overhead hazards such as pipes. So that will determine which type of hard hat that you use. As we said before, we'll always inspect our hard hats for cracks or wear or damage. If for some reason you've ever used your hard hat and you've been struck by something, you'll want to replace that hard hat out. You'll also check your suspension, and you need to know how to properly put it on and take it off. Some of them may have a service life, may have an expiration date. Some of them will even tell you if you can wear them backwards. If you can wear them backwards, you need to be careful that you have no hazards that the brim is supposed to protect you from. We never encourage the use of hard hats backwards, but some do allow it, and that's up to your employer as well. So hard hats are meant to be protecting our heads, like I said, from things that are falling, electricity, or contact with by bumping into overhead objects. Hard hats. Next, we're going to look at eye and face protection. The hazards we are concerned about is impact, splashes, laser and welding flash, and maybe even things like flying objects such as dust. This is a face shield. You would apply to, you could potentially put it on the inside of your hard hat, and it's going to protect your eyes, your nose, and your mouth. Some people use face shields from things such as bloodborne pathogen splashes or chemical splashes. You can get safety glasses or face shields that are prescriptions. Safety glasses and goggles comes in all kinds of sizes and shapes. These are just standard safety glasses that have the side protection from anything coming into the side. Would they be good for splashes up underneath or over? Probably not. When we're really concerned about splashes or vapors, then we're looking at things such as goggles. These will be marked as ANSI Z87 somewhere on the glasses. That indicates that those are safety glasses, ANSI Z87. Hearing protection. There are also any number of hearing protectors available, and each one has different pros and cons. We're obviously concerned about the hazard exposure of 85 decibels or more over an 8-hour day, because that can cause hearing loss. A company that has noise levels over 85 decibels for an 8-hour day need to implement a hearing conservation program, which includes hearing protection. There are 3 basic types of hearing protectors: the type that go inside your ear canal, those that cover the canal called canal caps, and then there are hearing protection, which are ear muffs. Some actually will actually connect to your hard hat, so you can wear a hard hat and the muffs at the same time. Each of these offer a different level of protection called a noise reduction rating, and your employer will help you determine the correct noise reduction rating and type of hearing protection for the application. Next up is respiratory protection. Now, there are 2 things that we typically try to protect our lungs from. That may be particulates and it may be gases. And there are any number of respirators available, from what's known as a filtering face piece all the way up to a self-contained breathing apparatus, such as a firefighter might wear. Now, this, as a filtering face piece, people often call them dust masks or dust respirators. They are respiratory protection. As you can see, a respirator will have 2 straps on a filtering face piece. If you just see one strap, that should be like your first indication it might be a problem. They will have NIOSH on them, N-I-O-S-H, which is the body that certifies or approves respirators. So every respirator needs to be NIOSH approved. So your employer is trying to protect you from either particulates or gases, and depending on the level of exposure is what type of respiratory protection you may be required to use. In order to use respiratory protection beyond a filtering face piece, anything that's required beyond a filtering face piece, you will need a medical evaluation, you'll need fit testing, you'll need training every single year to use those respirators. Now, if you determine that there's not a hazard in the workplace, but because of nuisance dust, you would like to use a filtering face piece respirator, which is just the whole respirator filters. If your employer allows it, you can use those on a voluntary basis, but you need to have training to use these essentially in the maintenance and care and understanding their limitations that you can't just use them anywhere. So you can use them voluntarily if there's no hazard, but your employer has to approve that. Hand protection. We can have hand protection at any number of levels, and it could be for chemicals, it could be to prevent you from being cut or punctures, needle sticks or splinters, corrosives, bloodborne pathogens, irritants, and even electricity. So there are so many gloves out on the market. You need to make sure you know what the hazard is so that you're wearing the right glove to protect yourself. And once again, as in everything else, make sure you're inspecting them, making sure there's no holes or openings or that they haven't deteriorated in some way. Some even help you with gripping. They're very rubber to help you grab a hold of things, and that helps with ergonomics sometimes too. So any number of gloves may be used in the workplace. Foot protection. We often want to protect our feet from things like falling objects, rolling onto our foot, electrical, slipping, punctures, corrosive molten metals, hot or slippery surfaces. So all of those things may determine the type of foot protection that you need. Most often, steel-toe boots or shoes may be required. If you don't need ankle protection, if the hazard is not to your ankle, they may allow the steel-toe sneakers. But that is the hazard assessment. That is the assessment that is done to help you determine what is the appropriate footwear for the hazards. Some even have a slide-on toe guard to go over regular shoes. So your employer will help you determine the right protection for your feet. Fall protection. So when we have heights in our workplace, you may be required to wear fall protection. If you're in general industry over 4 feet, you need fall protection, whether it's nets or guards such as handrail, toe board, and midrail. Or if they can't provide that protection, you may have to wear fall protection such as a harness with lanyards, etc. A lot of training is required to use these, and these are very important to be inspected prior to every single use to make sure that you're protected in the event of a fall. So that's personal protective equipment awareness in a nutshell. For more information, please contact us at SafetyWorks or join us for other safety and health topics available at www.safetyworksmaine.gov. Thank you and have a safe day.